the Elevator Podcast. I'm Heather Nemelka, your host, and today we are going to be talking about overcoming self doubt and basically stop feeling like you're not good enough. And this is an opportunity for us to think about how we are treating ourselves and those thoughts, the inner dialogue in our heads that keeps telling us that we can't do something, that we're not able. So you need to ask yourself, what makes you doubt yourself? And oftentimes, what makes you doubt yourself are external, but oftentimes it's internal as well. And first, we want to talk about recognizing those limiting beliefs that make you doubt yourself. I know as a mother, and even before I became a mother, I had limiting beliefs, thinking I wasn't capable, I wasn't able to do something, I wasn't enough, whatever it might be, because it might have been something new that I'd never tried before. It might be something that I thought was really hard. And oftentimes we have those limiting beliefs when we are exploring doing something different or something that seems overwhelming. We tell ourselves we can't do it because it's just seems hard or we've never done it before, so we don't have experience. So I want you to think about, what are three self doubts holding you back? Is it, I couldn't possibly do that because I'm not smart enough? Is it, I couldn't possibly do that because I don't have the time or the money or the experience? What are those limiting beliefs that are keeping you from doing things you really want to do? I know as a mother, I would think, am I doing enough for my kids? Am I, who am I outside of being a mom? Also, I remember thinking about lots of things. What if I fail? And I think that's a concern of a lot of women, trying to do something, and what if I fail in the process? I remember growing up not wanting to try anything that I think I wouldn't be good at, that I would fail at. And I'm not super coordinated, and so I wouldn't do most sports because I didn't think that I was coordinated enough to participate and be good at it. And so that was a limiting belief for sure growing up, because I didn't feel like I could do any sports because of my lack of coordination. And I think something that's really helpful for me is writing down what those limiting beliefs are and reflect on them, and ask yourself, are they really true? Are these facts? Because oftentimes these doubts that we have are thoughts. So self doubts are thoughts, not facts. Now, it is possible that there could be a fact that you can't do something because, for example, you don't have the finances, or you don't have the degree to be able to apply for a certain job, whatever it may be. There are some areas where there are facts, but most of the time, the things that are holding us back are just our own thoughts. They're not actually true, but we have taught ourselves that they are believable. And oftentimes we tend to remember our failures over our successes. So it's really easy for us to remember all of the things we've done badly or that we're not good at, and have a really hard time recollecting our successes. And I'm not sure why it is that we focus on those failures, but we oftentimes can remember the failures far more easily than we can recognize and remember our successes. So the next thing we want to talk about, once you've discovered what those self-doubts are, what are the limiting beliefs, is reframing those limiting beliefs. I have a friend, and she has two little girls, and she will not let them say I can't. So that's vocabulary in their house that isn't allowed. It's like a, swear jar word. They can't say I can't. And she said they can say things like, I I want to be able to, I don't know how to do this yet, but they cannot say the words I can't. And I love that because she's teaching her children not to limit themselves, not to think that they can't do something. And if we reframe these limiting beliefs, it actually gives us some confidence. So, for example, some of the things that you might want to do is you might write, I'm not good enough to go back to school, or I'm not smart enough to go back to school. And you can reframe this to say, I am capable of learning and growing. And that's a way of being able to say that even though you in your mind might want to limit yourself because you naturally are going in that direction, by just reframing it, it gives you some confidence. It helps you overcome those self doubts that keep you from maybe doing those harder things. I remember when I was, uh, um, I remember when I had a friend approach me, and he was a professor at the BYU Business School, and he asked me if I would be interested in going back to school to get my MBA. In fact, he was saying that he and another professor had talked and they thought I should go back to school and get my MBA. And this other professor I knew really well from when I was back in school as a freshman. And at first I was flattered that he thought that I could go back to school and get my MBA, because that seemed like it wasn't something I ever would have considered in my entire life. And so when he first said it, he had come up to me at church and said, I think you should go back to school and get your MBA. I audibly laughed, because to me, MBAs were for really smart people, not for people like me. Up until just recently, I was a stay-at-home mom. And just recently I had gone back to work. I was working full time. I had 5 kids. I had an eBay business and an Amazon business. I had church responsibilities. I was super, super busy. And the fact that he thought I could go back to school and get my MBA, it wasn't just the thought of I was too busy to go back to school, but also I'm not smart enough to get an MBA. And I told him as my excuse that I was working full time and I was now a single mom and I didn't have the time to be able to go back to school. And he said, "Oh, well, there's an executive MBA program where you can go back to school and that's on the weekend. So every other weekend. So you can work full time and then just do the school on, every other weekend." And again, I just thanked him for thinking of me. And I said, I just don't think that that's possible. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, my former husband had gone to Wharton and had gotten his MBA years ago. And I remember how much time that took and how hard that was. And there was no way that I was going to put myself through that. And I didn't think I could even get into, business school, because you have to take the GMAT, you have to get letters of recommendation. There were all these reasons why I would never be able to go back to school and get my MBA. And I told him again that, thank you, but I just, it's not possible. And he said, "Well, I'm planting the seed. I want you to think about it." And all the rest of the day and night, I couldn't stop thinking about it, which was crazy because I thought I dismissed it in that conversation, but my brain kept just thinking about it. And then that evening, I prayed, and I felt so strongly that that is what I was supposed to do, is go back to school and get my MBA. But immediately I had these limiting beliefs in my head, these self-doubts telling me, "Heather, you're not smart enough. You don't have enough money. You have kids. How can you, have your kids and go back to school, and you're not going to remember things. You're so much older." And I really gave myself every excuse I could possibly give myself to say, it's not possible. I just can't go back to school. And once I decided after that prayer that I was going to go back to school and get my MBA, I just knew I could do it. It was interesting because once I was convicted and I knew that this is something I was going to do, I had no problem moving forward and taking the steps that I needed to get back, get into school and get into the program. Some amazing, miraculous things happened to get me into the program, but I did go back to school and I got my MBA. And I never would have gone back to school and got my MBA if this person hadn't said, "You should go back to school and get your MBA," because my self-doubts told me that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't capable, that I couldn't possibly remember things because my brain was too old. And if I let those limiting beliefs dictate my future, then I wouldn't have got my MBA and had that incredible growing experience that changed my life. So I share that because as mothers, we oftentimes think we can't do something. What's really so interesting is we tell our children, "You can do it. You've got this." We're great coaches of our children, encouraging them, telling them they can do anything. And when it comes to ourselves, we tell ourselves, "Nope, you can't do it. It's not possible." And it goes against everything that we tell our children. As mothers, we are always encouraging our kids, and we never encourage ourselves. But we need to change that. So reframe these limiting beliefs and tell yourself, "Not yet." So basically what it would look like is instead of saying "I can't" or "I could never," you say something like, "I am not able to go back to school yet, but I am capable. I just am choosing not to." Or you can say, "I am, approaching opportunities, but I'm not going to do this yet." And it it leaves yourself open for possibilities to be able to do more and to consider going back to the workforce or going back to school, starting a business. And there are lots of things that maybe you haven't considered yet. And leave the door open to what you might be able to do in the future, and don't tell yourself that you can't right now, because those self-doubts, those limiting beliefs are what's keeping you from progressing. Now, something else that I want us to recognize is that confidence is built, not given. And I feel like we all have the confidence within us, but we have to remember it because we don't have the evidence. And I have said before that confidence requires evidence. But in that, you have to build up this confidence over time by collecting the evidence. So taking the time to recollect the great things that you've done, and it might not even be great things. It might have been just difficult conversations that you've had or accomplishments that you've had over time that stretched you, that maybe according to somebody else or comparing yourself to somebody else might not be amazing, but to you, it's a real significant achievement. And that leads me to also talking about comparison. So we talked earlier about why do we have these self-doubts? Where do they come from? Sometimes it's society, and sometimes it's past experience or your family. Maybe you had parents that told you you couldn't do something. But I think one of our greatest challenges is overcoming this comparison. So we tell ourselves things in our minds and we have self-doubt because we're comparing ourselves to other people that seem to have it all, that have figured it out. And we're actually comparing ourselves to the wrong people. We should be comparing ourselves to ourselves. Are we progressing every day? Are we getting better? And when we stop comparing ourselves to the people around us, then that's where the real magic happens, where we can start to grow, because we're comparing ourselves to people that we might be holding up on a pedestal that really on the outside look like they're amazing and they're able to accomplish all these great things, but internally they may be even dealing with their own self-doubts, or they may also be really struggling. So recognize that this confidence can be built over time, and you can overcome those self-doubts. Something else that is also really important and helpful is to realize that there is a myth that we have about feeling ready. That when you feel ready is when you can then start to do things. I don't feel quite ready to return to the workforce yet. I'm just thinking about it. Or I will start a business when I'm ready. And there is never a great time to do anything. I've learned that. And when I was considering going back to business school, my brother, Brian, I was talking to him and I said, I just don't think it's good timing. I still have kids at home. Maybe I should do this later. And he said, Heather, 2 years are going to go by whether you're in business school or not. So just go to business school and do it. And I'm so glad he told me that, because that was 100% what happened. There's never a perfect time to do anything. Never a perfect time to start a new business, to go back to school, or to try something really hard. It's never convenient. And your children can often be the ones that you're holding yourself back for. And interestingly enough, your children will be able to see a really strong, capable woman when you do the things for yourself that are hard. You are setting an example for your children every time you take on difficult things. So don't let time and readiness be the reason why you don't do something. Don't hold yourself back simply because you don't feel ready. Lastly, one of the best tools I've come across to help myself overcome self-doubt is our positive affirmations. And we've talked about that before, but I want to talk about it in a little bit more detail. So I always thought positive affirmations were hokey because it just sounded silly that you would look in the mirror and tell yourself, you are smart, you are wonderful, whatever those affirmations are. And I had a time when I was working at Amazon, and I had gone through COVID, and I had really bad brain fog. And instead of being able to articulate my thoughts and piece different things together, I had a real struggle, and I just was having the hardest time. Whereas before, I was able to communicate well and think things through, and the brain fog kept me from being the person who I always was. And I remember my manager said, we can do medical accommodation, you can take a break, whatever. And I felt like, no, this is not who I am. I know I can do this. But I started to doubt myself, and I thought, maybe I can't. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought it was. Maybe I'm not Amazonian, and I'm not as great as everybody else is. And I had to overcome those self-doubts through positive affirmations. So I learned about what positive affirmations are, and basically it's taking statements and saying them in the present. So instead of saying I will be or I will do, you say I am. So I am smart, or I am capable, I am becoming XYZ. And so I made a list of positive affirmations. I made about like 6 or 7. So I remember my first list of positive affirmations were words like I am smart, I am capable, I am creative, I am hardworking, I am happy, I am able to do XYZ. And at first, they did kind of feel hokey, but then as I continued to do it and say it over and over again, I started to believe them. And something else that's really important with positive affirmations is it's not enough just to make a list of affirmations. You need to feel it. You need to say it as if you mean it. And over time, your brain starts to believe it. And it sounds crazy, but it's actually true. So every day, I had a list of these positive affirmations on my mirror and also next to my desk. So whenever I was doubting myself, I could look at this positive affirmation list and remind myself that I was capable, that I was smart. And it just helped retrain my brain into thinking of who I was capable of being and becoming that person. And so I rewired my brain that way. And I know it's true. And over time I've changed those positive affirmations to be different. So once I feel confident in certain areas, I might change them. So right now my positive affirmations talks about being an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur. I am successful. I am making money. Those kind of things that can cause me to have self-doubt if I don't believe it. And so I tell myself this. And when I talk about saying it with feeling, like shouting it, feeling it, like what does it feel like to be confident, happy, able, smart, and really feel it when you say it. And you can say it twice a day or once a day. I would say it in the morning always, and then I would just look at it periodically through the day, my list of affirmations. So know that positive affirmations are a great way to overcome self-doubt. Lastly, confidence comes from taking action. A friend of mine said, step into the darkness and the light will come. Oftentimes, we just have to have faith that the action that we're taking will lead us to the goals and the outcomes that we want in our lives. So if there's something you really want to do, whether it's going back into the workforce, going back to school, starting a business, or just trying something new, take a step into the darkness. You don't know everything. You're going to have these self-doubts telling you that you are not capable because you've never done it before. It's something new. But tell yourself that you are able and that it is possible. Our brains are great at keeping us alive. They're not great at helping us live. And you need to live your life, you need to live your dreams, and you need to take that action before you convince yourself that you can't do it. So take small steps. Action forward progress is going to get you closer to what you really want to accomplish. And taking those steps will again help you overcome that self-doubt, because as you start to progress, you can have confidence about all of the things that you're doing and look back at your time and see the evidence that you're able to do all of these hard things. So that's my advice, how to overcome self-doubt, and stop thinking that you're unable and believe in yourself. If you enjoyed this session, like in the comments below and subscribe to the Elevator podcast, and excited to continue on this journey with you. I think I want to change the ending. Okay. So if you enjoyed this podcast, I hope you will subscribe and leave comments and a like below, and that will help us continue to bring you great content and value over the coming weeks and months. Thanks for joining us.